See, the thing about being a model is that everyone expects you to be really stupid, which is great, because all you need to do is look good and everyone's really happy. It's nothing like school. Can you believe they actually told me, if you don't get your A-levels, you'll end up on the checkout at Tesco's? I mean, how deterministic is that? Just because I preferred Topshop to a crappy maths class didn't mean they could predict my future. Of course, I told them, but they were having none of it. As far as they were concerned, we all lived in a clockwork universe, and the future was predetermined by the present. All that cause and effect rubbish. So, what's a girl to do? It was obviously a waste of time arguing with someone who thought Newton had all the answers, so I...
5 minutes, Katie.
Do you want me now?
No, sweetie, in 5.
See, it was just typical of that school. Absolutely no appreciation of chaos. They just thought everything was turning rubbish and we were all doomed. It was just too depressing. So I spent my time hanging at the shops, and that's where I met Justin. At first, I thought he was one of those pervs who thinks they can pick up girls by offering them fake modelling jobs. But turns out he really was this scout for a famous model agency. Justin said I had a great look and that I should go to their office and get my picture taken. So I thought, why not? And that's how I got to be a model. Now, I ask you, what better example of a non-linear dynamic could you ask for? It's like the perfect butterfly effect. Me meeting Justin outside Primark completely blew away all that must-try harder rubbish. It was so cool. I went from bunking off to Paris Fashion Week overnight. A huge effect from a tiny cause, which, according to Know-It-All Careers advisors, just doesn't happen. I mean, what world do they live in? Of course, what they'd say is that they could have predicted it if they'd known all the conditions at the start, like me bunking off and Justin being there and us meeting, but that's just a feeble excuse, because no matter how many things they know, there's always some tiny thing you'll miss. That's why it always pees down when the forecasts say, get out your bikini, because as much as they try, they just can't measure everything that affects the weather. It's a chaotic system, just like practically everything in the real world. See, for hundreds of years, science depended on measuring things. Speed, distance, weight, time, even how thick you were. And all of the time, they thought their measurements were getting them closer and closer to reality, and that tiny errors didn't really matter at all. So, like failing your GCSEs, it might not tell them exactly how much of a drongo you were, but it definitely marked you for retail. And if it didn't work out like they said, well then you were just a freak, a random event they could ignore. The same way they ignored all the other stuff that didn't fit, like weather or life or pretty much the whole universe. See, measurement almost always lets you down. Take me, for instance. I'm supposed to be a size 10, although my agent freaks out if I go above an 8. And yeah, I am always starving. But if you were to measure me really, really accurately, like even including the texture of my skin, then that simple 10 gets much bigger. Because the line you'd measure wouldn't be an ideal one like you get in geometry class, but a really gross, irregular thing that would make you think I had some terrible skin disease. And if you tried to measure how long that line was, well, you'd soon realise you couldn't, because it goes on forever. The more detail you get, the longer the line grows, and it never stops. So I suppose you think I'm really fat now. It was just a Malteser. Obviously, this isn't one of those freak documentaries, and I don't really have massive boobs or an infinitely big bum. It's just that straight lines and circles and triangles and all that stuff they make you do in maths is just hopeless at describing the real shape of things in the world. Well, that's why we have chaos, so we can look at the way things really are. It's like being backstage at a fashion show. There's all these people running around and shouting, and you'd think to look at it that it was worse than a school playground. But what looks like chaos is really just a complicated collection of people doing stuff to get me on that catwalk. And if one of them was to sneak out for a line of Charlie or a quick fag, well then the show would be different in some way. But it would still be a show. Of course, in fashion, there's always some pretentious twat of a designer who starts it all off and brings everyone together. But when it comes to weather, or even life itself, you have to ask yourself, who's the designer? I mean, what makes all the different stuff we're made of decide to come together and make me? Well, how should I know? Like I said, I'm just too complicated. Which, when you think about it, isn't bad for a model.
Katie, you're on.
Coming!